want to answer a question that we got from a viewer a couple weeks ago. She said, I tried to send a photo to my doctor's portal, but it was rejected because it was too large. How do I make it smaller? Well, there's lots of ways, and if you Google for resizing photos, you'll see software like OrphanView and GIMP and Photoshop Express. I want to give you just what I consider the simplest methods to do that. If your photo is on Windows, then I say use the built-in Photos app that comes with Windows. It can resize. If you're on an iPhone or a Mac, just email the picture to yourself. That will resize it. And if your photo is in the cloud, like with Google Photos or with Amazon, then you can download it the wrong way. I'll show you what I mean by that. First, for on my Windows computer, I want to get the Photos app. It's just built in. It's called Photos. Then I find a photo that I want to resize. This one of me looking like I'm working on a picnic table in the beautiful Florida forest. First, let's see what size it is. I click on the little I for info, and it tells me that's 5.2 megabytes. Let's say that we need it to be less than 1 megabyte. Windows Photos can do that, no problem. You just click the three dots and then resize image. If you know exactly what you want, you can fill this in, or I'm going to just go with percentage and say make it 50% of what it was. And it tells us that the current size then was 5.2 megabytes, and this will now bring it under 1 megabyte at 885K. All I have to do is save it, and my new photo will be able to get uploaded to that portal. Next, what about an iPhone or a Mac? The simplest way to do that is to email it to yourself. Now, this is my iPhone. It doesn't matter whether I use Google Photos or Apple Photos to get the photo. What matters is that I email it with the Apple email. So I can open up Google Photos, find a picture. Oh, there's that same one. I just tap Share and Share to. Now, not Gmail, that doesn't do it. You need to use the mail that comes with the phone or with your Mac computer. Email it to yourself and resizing. Now, when you tap send, look at this. It offers to downsize the photo to any one of these. If we want it less than 1.1, then we should go to medium. 167K will be good. Now you'll receive that in an email, and you can send it on from there or download it to your computer. Lastly, let's go look at Google Photos. Let's say it's this cute little raccoon picture that we want to send. Let's first look at its current size, 5.5 megabytes. We'll talk about this MP later. It's the MB, the file size that I'm looking at. So that's way too big to send. And here, if I click the three dots and download, that is going to download the 5.5 megabyte file, which is normally what I recommend. That's the good way of downloading pictures from Google Photos. But since our intent is meant to resize and downsize it, then I'm going to just right click and save image as, and call it raccoon. And when I click save, notice it's telling me here that the raccoon has been downloaded to my computer at 321K. That's an incredible. You can see why normally that is the bad way to download, because you're going to be losing a lot of quality. But for these purposes, that works so slick. Now, just because it has been reduced in size significantly doesn't mean that it's going to be too bad to see. Let's go get that from the computer now. So I'm going to upload the raccoon, the downsized raccoon photo from my computer to Google Photos. Here it is. And it still looks just fine, even though it's only 300K in file size. So no, I would not be able to blow this up to a big photo on the wall. I can't zoom in very far, but it looks fine for looking at it on the computer. So those are 3 down and dirty ways. With Windows, use the built-in Photos app and resize. iPhone or Mac, email the photo to yourself. Google Photos, download the bad way. But now I need to explain a little bit more. You need to have the concepts of what are we talking about with file size versus pixel size. So the 2 measurements for photos are resolution, which is the number of pixels, and file size. So notice whenever you look at the info panel for a picture, you will see resolution measured in pixels and file size measured in megabytes or kilobytes. The pixels mean the little dots, the points of color that make up your picture. This particular picture has 4,032 pixels wide and 3,024 pixels high. If you multiply those, you come up with 12 million pixels, or megapixels. Your camera might have settings. For example, my Samsung Note 9 is capable of taking a 12 megapixel photo, but I could have selected settings to make it less. I'd recommend not doing that. My iPhone 7, same thing, 12 megapixel. Now, if you have a digital SLR camera, you might have a lot more capability, and make sure to check your settings that you're not using a low megapixel setting. So lots of megapixels means high photo quality. Few megapixels means low photo quality, like this one, and this is what's called being pixelated. There are very few pixels, so it looks blurry. Now, file size is different. File size is simply the amount of space your picture takes. So if you think of a file like a suitcase, and these are all the clothes I want to take with me in my suitcase, I have poor packing skills. I would need this bigger suitcase to fit all these clothes. But if I let my husband Jim pack, he would be able to get it into a smaller suitcase. So that is file compression. So what is this Google Photos storage saver size? When you use Google Photos, you have the choice of uploading your photos in original size or storage saver. Original means original, all pixels, and does not add any file compression. Realize that you're paying for storage. You don't want to pay for more than you need. So Google has this feature called Storage Saver, which limits photos to 16 megapixels and adds file compression. For videos, it limits to 1080p. Now, if you're shooting a lot of 4K videos, you might not like this. But most photos with smartphones anyway are not more than 16 megapixels. So you do not lose any photo quality. It will reduce your file size anywhere from 20 to, I've seen it reduce it to 70%. So that will save you storage cost without reducing photo quality. As I say, unless your original was more than 16 megapixels or 4K videos. So it's just a better way of packing, no loss in pixels. Let me show you. So I have 3 copies of this particular photo. This first one is in original size, the second one is in storage saver, and the third one is the result of using that bad download method, you know, the right click and save as rather than the 3 dots and download. So let's look at the pixels for these. I opened this one and it says that this is a 12.2 megapixel, that 4032 by 3024. It has the full resolution of the original. I'm going to zoom in on this spot of the picture, And we can see that those are 2 kayaks with 3 people. This is the original photo. Now let's look at the one that is in Storage Saver. It is also 12.2 megapixels, and I can zoom in and see the 2 kayaks and the 3 people. Now this one that is the result of the bad download method, the right click, if I try to zoom in, that's as far as it goes. That's where you can really tell the resolution. You cannot zoom in. That means you could not blow up to a big picture. This one is only 1.1 megapixels. And finally, can you upsize a low resolution photo? Well, yes, you can. I was quite surprised when I was playing with the Windows Photos resize command, and I saw not only could I tell it to change the percentage by 50%, I could also do it to 200% and increase quality to 100%. And it gives me, from a 320K original, it gave me 2.6. But don't expect the upsize photo to look as good as the original. It just can't do it. It's trying to figure out where the missing pixels were from, and it doesn't do that great a job. AI can do better. Try upscale.media if you ever have a low resolution picture that needs to be better. I'm Chris Gould with Geeks on Tour, and this was Fun with Photos.
This is Ron Brown with Tech for Senior, where we make videos to help seniors understand technology and occasionally talk about history. Today we're going to talk about why cable companies exist. Now this is a follow-up on a video that I made last week on how to save a lot of money on your cable internet service. But I wanted just to talk a little bit about the history of cable companies through my eyes as I remember this growing up, so I can relate to specific years and events. We'd sure appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to the channel. Everyone at Tech for Senior is a volunteer, and we'd sure appreciate that like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Let's get on with a bit of history. Now, those of you who are over the age of 70 are going to smile about my story. You'll understand what I'm saying. Those of you who are under the age of 50, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. It'll be a bit of a history lesson. And if you're from across the pond, if you're over in another country other than Canada and the United States, you'll say what you always do is, well, they do things a bit different in the Americas. All right, let's go back to the year. The year is 1960. Well, we're actually going to go back a little farther than that because I was born in Edmonton, Alberta in 1952. And in 1957, my parents bought this house that you see on the screen, and that's where I was raised. Now, in 1960, they purchased, get a load of this, they purchased an Electrohome television. An Electrohome, remember the big models, the great big, it came in a cabinet, and it had a big CRT screen in it, and that was a color television. And I was a young boy. I remember we had the first color television on our street. So Friday evenings, my parents would often have people over, and they would all be sitting in the front room, all squealing, oohing, and awing about the color picture. Now, as I remember this as a little guy, I remember that being sort of odd because the faces were yellow, green, or red, and my father was constantly getting up to adjust the rabbit ears on the TV. And as someone else came in and sat down and Mom got a chair for them, then again he had to adjust those rabbit ears. And the faces were all weird colors. I always thought black and white was better, so I'd go down to our family room downstairs and just watch things in black and white. But there'd be squealing and oohing and awing of all this brand new color TV, which was first in on our street. Well, it wasn't too long, probably a couple of years later in the early 60s, where big announcement came and we were getting Cablevision. And this was a big announcement. And then, of course, the red, green, and yellow faces all went away, and we had normal color, and everyone was happy with color TV. Now, in 1969, I was 17 years old and I had just graduated from high school. I decided to go over to Europe and backpack around. Remember the $3 a day thing you could do? Well, I flew over from Edmonton to London with Ward Air Airlines, a big charter firm that came in Canada with Max Ward, and it was $300 return. So I went over and backpacked around Europe for a month, and I was absolutely shocked what I saw. First of all, the cars were so old. Oh my gosh, that was weird. Back in Canada, the United States, we had big things were happening. There was economic might. We had new cars coming. We had big freeways being developed. Lots of exciting things happening. But man, it was just weird with those old cars. And also those tiny little roads that people drove these old cars down. I thought people seemed happy and I sort of had a good time, but it was a bit weird. And then most people didn't have television. They had, of course, few people had black and white TVs, and of course they were all on the rabbit ears. But most people didn't have television. So I was really happy when I got back from Europe and I got back to color television, Elvis Presley, and big cars and big roads and lots of fun things that we could do. I thought it was a bit weird. Anyway, that's how it was back in 1969. What's important to understand is that the recovery of post-war Europe took another 15 years longer than the United States recovery. Now remember, when the war was over and all the servicemen come back into the United States and Canada, the factories were at top production. The economy was moving, and of course those people had jobs and got things moving, and so life was pretty exciting times in the 60s in Canada and the United States, but not so much in Europe, as the recovery still hadn't been completed and wouldn't happen for another, about 10 years. Why is this important? Well, remember I talked about cable. Remember I talked about getting cable. Well, everybody in Canada and the United States, they laid millions of miles of cable. Millions, maybe billions, I don't know. It was a lot of cable that everybody had cable. Even small little towns had cable companies. Everybody had cable TV because you could get color TV. It was amazing how much cable, the coaxial cable that they laid. And even small towns would have, like, Bob the Barber would have a Bob the Barber and a cable company. He'd maybe call it Bob's Barber and Cable Company, and you get a few people together and string some cable, and then they would cable a bunch of houses. And we've all cabled things in our homes, and we know that coaxial cable is easy to split and connect, and so it wasn't really that difficult. And so what we had is a huge network of cable companies, small cable companies, but lots of them all across both countries. Now this, of course, did not happen in Europe. There were no cable companies. This period of time was different, and so it was a bit unique in what we were seeing. So something happened in 1980 that would change the world as we know it. Let me think, what was that? I'll give you a second to think about that. Of course, it was the internet. The internet was created, and you remember those squeaky little dial-up modems that we had? I'm sure all the old people remember that. Those squeaky little dial-up modems that allowed us to connect to bulletin boards and some things that, because the internet really didn't do very much back when it first came online. But then quickly, we knew that it was going to be successful. So these telephone modems that we're using wasn't really going to work. And so the cable companies figured out that you could actually transmit a internet signal, a digital signal, down a coaxial cable. And this was pretty cool. This was big stuff. And of course, the rest is history, as you know. And so what happened I'll talk about Canada. First of all, in Western Canada, a company by the name of Shaw Cable from Edmonton started to purchase and buy up smaller cable companies and move west towards British Columbia and east towards Winnipeg, and they bought up all the cable companies, the small cable companies that were providing cable television, because people wanted the internet, and that was a more complicated system and required fiber optic lines to be the main trunk lines to transmit all this data. And this, of course, happened in the United States as well with Cox Cable and Comcast. All these companies were formed who would be able to have the technology to bring internet to you as a high-speed cable service. But to do that was much more complicated. So old Bob, with his barber and cable service, just didn't work out very well because he didn't really understand all that technology. And so everyone was excited as this all grew. And that's how cable companies started to provide internet services. I remember on Vancouver Island here, our Comox Valley here quickly converted. They sold out right away to Shaw, and we were able to get fairly quickly high-speed internet into our homes, and that was a really exciting time. I remember up on the northern part of the island, a friend of mine was a liquor store manager, and he had the cable services on the northern end of the island. He was quickly bought out. He bought a big yacht and a mansion down island, and I haven't seen him since. The cable company, Shaw in particular, bought out there was nobody left. They bought out everybody and ran the large fiber optic lines down that were able to provide high-speed cable internet service to your homes. So I want you to remember that if you have cable TV in your home, what you really have is fiber optic lines, transmission lines to the telephone pole, and that last section is cable. Now, if you have fiber optic to your home through a fiber optic company, then transmission line is fiber optic, but there is a fiber optic line that goes from your pole to your home. So it's the cable part is just that part from the telephone pole into your house. So why is this important? Why am I talking about this? Well, if you remember back to my trip in that period when I went to Europe, the very first time, there was no cable. Well, while they were cabling in Canada, the United States, in that whole post-war boom, that never happened anywhere else in the world. So by the time 1980 came along and we have internet, and the cable companies in Canada and the United States figured out that they could transmit high-speed data to you in your home, Europe had already passed that and had other options for them. And so they never went to the cabling. And so cabling and the idea of a cable company providing internet is really only a Canada and US idea. If you travel I've traveled to Southeast Asia many times, Australia a lot of times because my daughter lives there, and I used to work at Schiphol Airport in Holland. I can tell you that these countries, if you talk about cable television, by and large, they don't have that. They've never heard of it. It's just something that occurred in the Americas. So when you're looking at cutting the cord, you're thinking, well, how am I going to do this? What's happening with this cable company? I'm going to cut the cord. It's perfectly normal. The rest of the world doesn't have cable, and they have very fast, some of the most advanced and well-developed internet services are in Southeast Asia, India, and of course, China. And this is why when I talked last week about saving money, is the conversion to 5G, which will happen, that is what is going to replace the old cable companies. So that's a little bit of history about cable services and how they came to be. I thought it might be something you might be interested in. So anyway, be sure and watch that other video I made last week. I'll put the link up above. Now I'd like to draw your attention to an article that was published this week from the FCC. Let me read it. This week, FCC Chairman Jessica Rosenworcel announced a new plan to bring 5G coverage to more than 14 million American homes and businesses in rural America. This plan comes from new data acquired in its updated broadband coverage map with the hope of bringing 5G internet to Americans who need it. For the first time in our history of supporting wireless networks through a universal service system, this agency has comprehensive data about where service is and not all across the country, said Chairman Rosenworcel. This will be the foundation of our plan to expand the 5G service in rural America to where it is needed most, where people live, work, and travel. So in summary, why do we have cable companies? Well, cable companies provided a valuable resource for us in the 50s and 60s to allow cable vision to our homes so we could watch television. As the internet developed in the 80s, they provided high-speed internet to our homes so we wouldn't have to use those old squeaky modems. However, technology has moved ahead, and this coaxial cable, which is the only thing connecting you from your telephone pole to your house, is the limiting factor now in getting high-speed internet into your home. With 5G technology providing high-speed internet now to your home, I think the time has come to say goodbye to the old coaxial cable. As I said in my video last week, as we switch and cut the cord on our cable services, look for 5G technology from the big three. You're going to find some good competition and probably a lot cheaper prices if you look. It's Ron Brown with...
Let's start by opening Copilot, and I happen to like to use a web app of Copilot. So let me open it. Let's select New Topic, and here is the prompt that I'll be putting to Copilot. Please write a blog post on the following topic: seniors seeking help to become tech savvy. What are the best resources available to them to accomplish that task with the least amount of effort? Simple enough question. Let's see what I get for a reply. Bad when you consider it didn't take that long for it to come up with a pretty good answer, but not quite what I'm looking for, too cut and dry. And I'd like a little bit more information on the different topics that it came up with. So let me ask it the next question to massage its reply. So next, let me add the following prompt to continue the conversation with Copilot. Please rewrite the blog post giving me more details on all of the topics you mentioned, and please add some appropriate humor to make the blog post more interesting to read. Thanks. Now let's see what we get for a rewrite. Not bad. So I'll be using this once I finish checking the actual suggestions to make sure that they are valid, but this looks pretty darn good. So what I'll do next is I will copy this last reply. I will then open Notepad. I'll paste the information into Notepad. Control V will do that. Now I want to use this as a script for the next piece of AI that I'll be using to actually create the video. And to do that, I have to make some alterations to this. I'm going to stop the recording, make the changes, then come back and you'll see what changes I've made, and then we'll go on to the next step. So now that I have made the edits necessary for this to become my actual input for the next piece of AI that I'll be using, which is called Pictory AI, that will actually create the video for me. I will copy all of this. You may notice that I've added a couple of things in here on my own. That wasn't part of the original reply from Copilot, but this is my blog. It was never meant to be totally written by AI. I've now copied this. Let me minimize it. Let me open up my browser. I have Pictory AI opened. I'm going to provide the script, which is what I worked on in Notepad. I will now paste the information I had copied from Notepad in here. There's the title. There's all the information. Now let the magic happen. Hit the proceed. This may take a little longer than normal, considering that I am recording all of this in a Zoom private meeting. It has taken a little bit longer than usual. As I said, it's working inside something else. Taken that script and turned it into 39 scenes, 39 individual slides with backgrounds. I always provide my own narration, and we'll go into that in a second. The story's already there. It's got the script, it's got the scenes, it's got the background. The only thing it's still missing is a voice. Now, Pictory can make that even easier. It can provide its own narration. I don't like to do that. I like to use my own voice. So for that, record voice over. And once I hit this button, it'll be time for me to narrate. Ahoy, seniors! Are you ready to set sail on the vast digital ocean? Fear not, for you won't be venturing into uncharted waters. I'll apply that narration. Now you'll notice the narration has been created. There's also background music. And what I'll be doing next is going here to make some changes. Background music is at 100%. I never want it to be more than 30%. And my voiceover volume, I like that to be at 85%. Now, as far as the background music, this is what's been applied. I have many choices to choose from, and if I want to take the time, I can go through and listen to the others. In this case, I'm just going to leave what it selected as the default background music. I'll give you a little listen as to what the first slide sounds like. Fortunately, this is taking quite a bit of time. It's also being recorded within Zoom, so that makes things quite a bit slower. As I said, there are a total of 39 slides. This is the first one. I'll be continuing with this for the other 38 slides. And once it's all completed, this entire thing will be available on my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and do a search for @Bob3160, and you'll find this video. This is how we use AI to make life a bit simpler.